Hello everyone, Colin Canet here for WoodWorkWeb. Today we're going to do some design work. We're actually going to design a little side table. Now I featured this in one of our former videos and we've had a lot of requests for plans and so on for this little table. And today we're not going to make the plan, we're going to show you how to make your own plans so that you too can make this kind of little table. Now, when we design this table, we're going to be using something called a Fibonacci Gauge. And it's a design tool that uses something called the golden rule. And in Greek times, using mathematical numbers, somebody called Fibonacci figured out this golden rule. And they actually used it a lot on buildings throughout Europe. And in fact, they still use it for design works because it has such an element of making pleasing kinds of furniture. And if you've ever looked at something and said, oh, it looks like it's top heavy, or it looks like it's too wide, or it's unbalanced, this is what a Fibonacci gauge is to help correct those things, to give them sort of a pleasing look, a pleasing balance. Now I do use them. I've got a couple of big ones. This is a clear one, a little bit hard to see. This is another one, another big one that I use, a white one. And today we're going to be using this little one, and it's black on one side and white on the other, so it shows up against the paper that I'm going to be using. This is what a Fibonacci gauge, this is the spelling for it. You can look it up on the internet and see how to make the gauges. We're not going to show you how to make them. It's dead easy, and you can use it to help you in your designs of your furniture and your projects. Now, if you've missed seeing the little table in a previous video, this is what the little table looks like. And this is a design similar to something that was published in one of the magazines a few years ago. I don't know if I even have the magazine. I can't seem to find it. But we can actually make our own plans for a design that looks very similar to this that'll work for you. And you can see that it has sloping sides. There's a shelf at the bottom that comes through and it locks in place, and there's a couple of oval elements or round elements on it. Very nice little side table, easy to make, and these make great gifts if you're looking for something, some projects to make something for someone. Now, before we get started on the design, what we're going to do is on the board here, we're going to do a rough drawing, and then on a template, we're actually going to make a pattern, and we're going to do it on this material. Now, this is a hardboard material, brown on one side, and it's got some kind of a coating on the front. Now, this is just a small piece. Now, I picked this up specifically for pattern making, and it's a quarter sheet, so it's exactly 2 feet across by 4 feet long. So whatever we're making, we want to make sure that it's going to fit on this board. Now I'm going to be using some graph paper, and I don't know if you can see this, but this is 1/4 inch square graph paper, and all we're doing is making a rough drawing because we just want to get the simple dimensions, and then what we'll do is we'll actually draw those onto our pattern board, onto that white pattern board that I just showed you. I'm going to be using a felt pen, a black felt pen, so that you can see this properly, and I'm going to be stopping from time to time to double check my count the little squares. I don't want to do that on video. Now, to start off with, we have one known measurement, and that's the 24-inch wide that we're going to be using on our sheet. Everything after that we're going to make up as we go along. So on our board, we've got a bottom here, all the way along here, and this is 24 little squares to the top. And now, when we put our Fibonacci gauge measuring the top just like that, it gives us what we can use now for our width. And in this case, we're going to take this measurement and move it down to here. Now off camera I'm going to find the middle so that I can draw a line down so we know where the middle is. Now the purpose of a Fibonacci gauge is so that you can use these different points. And we've used the big one down below, we can now use the small one up top. And when I counted the small one, it's actually 10 little squares. So off camera I measured 5 over from each side. So we can actually draw a side view of what this is going to look like. So ours is going to be 10, and let's use a ruler here so we make a nice straight line. So that's the side of our table. So down here it's 14, up here it's 10. Now the top will fit on top of here, something like that, and it'll be the same width as this down here. So I've made it a little bit longer, but we're rough. Now the only other thing we need to do is to figure out what these little arcs are in here. And I don't know if we can use this. We should be able to use this to figure out maybe our height. No, that'll be too high. We're going to leave the circles for a moment and we'll figure that off camera. Let's go ahead now and look at the side view. Let's move over to the side view now. So we can draw a line. Now we've got the top and the bottom. We can draw a side view and just draw a line down anywhere. And that's our point. Now we don't have the shelf in here yet. But what we want to do, first of all, the first thing we want to do is we want to find how wide this should be. So when we look at these, we can actually extrapolate this information. So of course we can't use this because that's the height. We could use that, that would balance it, that would be square. But the other thing we can do is we can double these. So we can take this and double that, or we could take this one and double that. And in this case, I think we're going to take, I don't like things square. I like them a little bit, let's try this one here. Let's try doubling this one there and putting that there. What does that do? That gives us more of a vertical. I'm going to count these squares off camera and we'll draw a line up there and see what that looks like. Okay, when we took that measurement of this height and moved it over here and got a double measurement, we were actually 18. I think I've drawn a line in the wrong place here. There and there. This line should be here. So this is 18 inches to here. We'll white this out here. Now, so that's the side view, and of course the top will go on. The top will look like that. Now what we haven't got right now is the side, or the shelf. Now we need to take measurements from something, and we can take the height. That shelf is going to be too high up, although if you wanted to put up a shelf higher up, you could do that if you wanted to do 2 shelves. This one here, let's take this measurement, and I think that shelf is still a bit too high. There's too much underneath there. Let's have a look at this area here. Now all of this is all in balance, and we'll take a look at that. That looks good to me. That's 1, 2, that's 3 inches above the bottom. So let's go 1, 2, 3, and we could use that. Because this is rough design work, we can use this now for, this would be the bottom of our shelf. So we can start drawing in some lines now. There's the sides, and that shelf is going to come out a little bit on each side because we're going to put some dogs in there, and of course this is going to line up with the shelf on this side, so we're going to have to overlap this by probably 1.5 inches, maybe even 2 inches, and we'll have a look at that once we get that drawing put on our board. And the only thing we don't have here is this center, this little thing in here, and I think we're going to do that when we get to the actual design board. We'll do that. So we've got our rough, our basis right now. We're 10 inches here, 14 inches down here, so a little bit of a slope, and the table's going to be 18 inches wide, and the shelf is going to be 3 1/4, 4 inches, so 3 to 4 inches above the bottom of the little table. So here's our finished plans, and I've cleaned up this error that I made over here. So there's the side view, and there's the front view. And now what I'm going to do is take these measurements and move them onto the panel board, the whiteboard that we showed you earlier on, and we'll start making some patterns with these. So what I've done off camera is I've taken that great big 2x4 sheet, and I've cut it into smaller sizes that we can start drawing our patterns on. And the first thing I'm going to start working on is the side view, which is this little one here. And for that, of course, you'll need a bigger square. And the first thing that I've done is I found the center of this board. And from that, I'm going to be drawing the 10 inches on the top and the 14 inches on the bottom, 7 inches on either side here, 5 inches on either side here, and that will give me the angle. And then I'm going to experiment with the arcs and see what I can do for the arcs. Okay, I finished the side plan, and I finished it off camera because there's some detail that I wanted to be able to explain. So remember, we did the 14 inches wide at the bottom, so from there to there 14 inches, and at the top we're 10 inches from side to side. Now, to make the arc, what I determined was that 2 inches seemed to be a nice size that we could work with there. So the inside diameter of this little arc, if you want to put that in, is 2 inches from there to there and there to there. And I actually was able to find something at 11 inches of diameter that gave a nice arc. And in this case, it was my little Verispin that I have hanging on the wall. And that, I laid that on there and drew that line. That gave me that little arc. The second one, I wanted to try and get the arc about the same angle, and in this case I ended up finding something that was 6.5 inches diameter, and all it was a little pail of something, and I just laid it on there and drew that arc, and again that was 2 inches from there to there on each side, and then this just fit in between those two marks. Now the other thing that I made off camera is where the shelf is going to poke through, and in this case we're using all 3/4 inch material, so we knew that from we worked out that the bottom of this shelf was going to be around 4 inches, so we went, this happens to be 4 3/4 inches to the top here, so from the bottom to there, and all I had to do was draw a square box in there, and this is actually going to be cut out. So this area will be cut out, this area here will be cut out, that, and of course the two sides, and that will give us our pattern that we can use our router and actually cut out this and replicate this time after time after time. So let's take a quick minute and look at the detail of that shelf. Now this is what that shelf is going to look like when we draw it out. It's going to be sticking out from the sides by a little bit, and there's going to be a couple of jogs in it to accommodate sticking out. So what we know already is that inside to inside we're roughly 18 inches. We also know that we're using 3/4 inch material, so we have to add 3/4 of an inch to that 18 because we want to get the final length of this board. And we had a look on our tape measure, and I wrote up 2 inches here, but we thought 2 inches was a little bit much for this wood to be sticking out. We thought it would look a little bit too hefty. And we also looked at 1 inch, and we didn't think 1 inch was enough. So we're going to compromise. We're actually going to do 1.25 inches. So that wood's going to stick out 1.25 on each side. So we need to add that. So when we add all of those numbers together, what we end up with is this board being 22 inches long. Now you're probably wondering how we're going to find this measurement, how far this sticks out. Well, that's pretty easy because we already know the wood's going to stick out 1.25 inches, and we're dealing with 3/4 inch material. So all we have to do is add 3/4 of an inch to 1.25 inches. So 1.25 plus 3/4, and that's going to give you this distance here. This distance here, we determined on our side when we were drawing it up that this was going to be 8 inches. So that's the measurements that you're working with for the shelf. And we already know that these little blocks here need to be 3/4 of an inch from this side here. So 3/4 of an inch. And you can decide on what size wedges. I'm using 3/4 of an inch wide, and then the depth will be whatever the wedge is. So you'll work that out once you get to that detail. Okay, we finished making our templates. There's the end piece, and you can see this is the slot at the bottom where the lower shelf would go. And this, of course, is our bottom. This is our bottom shelf. And we've actually cut out the pins or the holes where the wedges are going to go through. There's a couple of tricks in making these templates that I'm going to show you on the table saw, just to demonstrate how quickly you can make these. Now the end piece, there's really no easy way of making this because the sides are at an angle, so you really need to do that on the bandsaw. Then I cleaned it up with a plane just to give it a nice even edge. But the trick that I wanted to show you is on the table saw you can actually cut that slot out, because if you remember on our 4x8 sheet this was absolutely flat across the bottom, and we selected it that way. And the way you can, after you've laid this out and check your measurements, you can actually put this on your table saw and put it in position, and you'll have to mark where the center of the blade is, and then you can actually turn the saw on and bring the blade up into the center like that, and that will give you a nice flat cut. And then to get the other side, of course, you need to drop it back down. And then to get the other side of it, you'll need to measure over and go back away from that to get your second cut. And you'll have to be exactly 3/4 of an inch. And I actually made a few cuts because I wanted this absolutely perfect. So I moved the saw or the fence away, and it wasn't quite enough, so I moved it a little bit more. Still wasn't enough, just a little bit more, so that I could get that slot absolutely perfect. Now, let's have a quick look at the tricks that you can use on the table saw when you're making the bottom shelf. And because these lines, move this over so you can see, these lines, this line here and this line here are identical. Once you figure out what that line is, if you set your fence at exactly that angle and raise your blade up a bit, you can actually make that cut here. And I only go in about 3/4 of the way, flip the board over, do the same thing on the other side, and I measure on the front and the back. I mark the line so I don't go too far. Then you can flip it over, do the same here and the same here. and that gives all of these measurements. Then you can actually reset the fence so that you can get the next measurement, which is this. And these are all, this is 8 inches in here, and then you can do the same thing here, flip it over, and the same on the other side. And then you just clean it up with a little hand saw, or you could use a chisel just to sort of clean up the edges and get the little end to drop out. So that's a real quick way of being able to make both of these templates. So let's take one last look at our little table. There's the end view, and there's the shelf coming through with a couple of little wedges. Now when you cut the ends off this, or the edges off these, keep these pieces that you cut off, because you can use those for wedges here. And this little table, you can actually put a couple of little wedges up in here too, just to add a little bit more detail. There's the front view of the little table, and of course we have the template for the lower shelf. We've already made that as well. We don't make a template for the top because it's just square, and it's the same width as the lower shelf and the same length. And the only other thing that we don't bother to make a template for is a couple of little rails on either side, and that's to attach on either side of the ends, and also to attach to the top of the table so that it firmly sits on there. So that's our little table, and that's now we've completed that part of the templates. So this concludes our video on template making for the little table. So for all of you who've asked about plans for the little table, now you can go ahead and make your own plans and make your own templates. And you can use these templates just to mark your sheets of wood when you make them, or if you want, you can use the pattern making bit with the router and actually make these very quickly. And in a follow-up video, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to make one of these little tables using these templates. But the real purpose of this video was to show you how to use this little Fibonacci gauge. There's dozens of sites on the internet that show you how to make them, but none of them show you how to use it. And now that we've actually used this to make a little table, what it shows is that there's really no wrong way of using this, because as long as you reference all of these points, you can double these, you can half them, you can add them together. All of these things work in conjunction with one another, and that's what helps to make a good design. And I know a lot of woodworkers like to modify and change plans. That's extremely common. But now, when you make your plans, you can actually make these little Fibonacci gauges, and you can actually make them so that they look nice, keep the dimensions and the style of it so that it all fits together and is pleasing for the eye. Before you go, I'd like to encourage you, if you haven't already, to please subscribe to our channel. We'd also like you to subscribe to WoodWorkWeb. We send out newsletters about 4 times a year. We don't inundate you with a lot of stuff, but also when you sign up to WoodWorkWeb, you'll find other things that you can do that non-members can't. So we encourage you to sign up to both of these, to our YouTube and to our website. And if you do that, you'll be able to find out, because you'll get an email when we're going to make this little table using the router to make this. So, I'm Colin Canet for WoodWorkWeb. Thanks for watching.